Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Larissa Valonis, and I am going to be your facilitator for this breakout session titled Aligning PBIS and Comprehensive School Counseling Programs. Today, we're going to discuss how we can align both of these programs to create a seamless system of support. This integration not only improves student behavior, but also supports their social emotional well being, academic success, and overall school climate. So, to get us started, I'm going to ask that you please drop your name, role, and maybe one challenge you see with integrating both PBIS and school counseling in the chat. Although this session is recorded, I'm going to be monitoring the chat live. So, I'm interested to see who's present today, who's here, where are you? Are you elementary? Are you middle? Are you high school? Are you K through 12? And what are some things that you've been hesitant about, or maybe you're like, that doesn't really make sense to align? How do those two things connect in a high school setting? I'm interested to see what you're thinking and considering about integration at this point. So if you can drop it in the chat now. I also want you to note my little symbol, that man dropping maybe um, a mic or garbage, whatever that little symbol is on my slide here. You're going to see that throughout. And those are connected to reflections that I want you to think about, and then drop your answers in the chat throughout this presentation. So, like I said, my name is Larissa, and a little bit about me before we get started. I have served as both an elementary and secondary school counselor since graduating from the University of Scranton in 2011. Throughout that time, I've served different roles in the schools I've worked at. Um, One relevant to this presentation is I've been a PBIS co-coach at both the elementary school I worked at, where we achieved fidelity implementation at all three tiers, and also the high school I previously worked at. Um, in my last district for City Regional, I had um, the wonderful opportunities to work with some amazing colleagues, and our work was highlighted by the National Center of School Mental Health, which a lot of that work came through a process we participated in during COVID, which was the COIN process with the support of PDE. So that was a really unique experience that really helped us create an interconnected systems framework, and really led a lot of the work that we ended up implementing. Um, I also was our department chair at my former district. Currently serving, though, I am a K through 12 crisis school counselor in my current district, which is Wayne Highlands, and I'm also our high school SAP coordinator. This spring, I've also had the wonderful opportunity to teach at Commonwealth University, their group counseling and leadership skills class. So that's been a wonderful experience so far this spring that I'm excited about. So, by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand the key components of both PBIS and comprehensive school counseling programs, explore alignment strategies to integrate both models, and identify practical applications to make this work in your school setting. At the end of the presentation, um, I do have a QR link to take you to a shared folder where some of the resources I'll mention are uploaded. So you just have some of those tools handy to maybe help you get started. And I'm always available. I love getting emails from people just asking to share or asking questions. I love collaborating. So those are some things that we're going to tackle today. Here's our mic dropper with our first question, doing a quick poll. How familiar are you with PBIS? So think about it not in previous roles, but right now in your current school district, in your current position, how familiar are you? And are you actively implementing it? So you can put an A in the chat. B, I know the basics. C, I definitely need a refresher. It's been a few years. So, PBIS, or Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, is a three-tiered prevention system designed to promote positive behaviors while reducing problematic ones. It's rooted in behavioral science and focuses on explicitly teaching appropriate behavior, just like we teach academic skills. The five key elements of PBIS include equity, systems, data, practices, and outcomes. Sound familiar? But at its core, PBIS is a proactive approach that involves families, schools, and the community working together. The ESCA National Model guides comprehensive school counseling programs. Just like PBIS, it's a tiered system that provides universal, targeted, and intensive supports. The ESCA model focuses on four components. We know it's define, manage, deliver, and assess. Comprehensive school counseling programs are systematic, data informed, and designed to support all students through a developmental, proactive lens. Essentially, PBIS and school counseling programs share a common goal to support student success by providing tiered, proactive, and data driven interventions. So, we have shared focus on prevention and intervention, use of data to drive decision making, commitment to equity and inclusion, and collaboration among school staff, families, and community partners. So, by integrating both PBIS and school counseling, what are we doing? We are creating a stronger, more cohesive system that benefits the entire school community. This slide really highlights our role, not just in our comprehensive school counseling programs, but in PBIS. They are the same. We are using data to identify gaps. We are developing programs and interventions to improve student outcomes. We are removing barriers for to create systemic change and collaborating with our partners, promoting standards-based curriculum and evidence-based and research-based. We're disaggregating that data and we are sharing it out, and we are culturally responsive. And it is three tiers. And I'm highlighting Trish Hatch's work right now. So, as we know in her work, she has, instead of just MTSS, which is very common um, reference in schools for that three tiers, MD is that multi tiered, multi domain system of support, which references our academic, social, emotional, and career. So you see, there's so many things that are in common here, and it's not even an exhaustive list. I'm tired of even just looking at this, but this is what we do. This is the good work that we do. This is what we are trained to do. So if we're trained to do this, we know how to do this. It only makes sense for us to do it and to lead it. So there's not a lot of very recent data. However, in kind of going through and skimming through some of the uh, ASCA journal entries that were in there, some of the recent, within the last decade, research articles, this one that was done that I linked below on the next three slides is, while it's within the last decade, I would say it's still pretty relevant. Just maybe some terminology has been updated, but it really breaks down nicely. Just here is what the Ask a National model, says about implementing a program school-wide for all students. And then here's what PBIS says as a primary prevention school-wide system. And then how can school counselors utilize PBIS strategies within our program? So I thought it was just a really nice visual that I wanted to include that helped maybe connect how does behavioral interventions work within it, or is it just a little piece, or can it be so much more? But as you'll see, I have my mic dropper on the bottom. So at this time, with you looking at this, I'm wondering what are one or two ways that your counseling program already aligns with PBIS? Maybe you didn't even think about it before. Maybe you do something separate, but now you're like, huh, maybe those do align. Wondering if you could drop those in the chat right now so I could take a look. So this is just another screenshot from that really nice visual that was done in the research article that I link at the bottom, just highlighting that evidence-based practices and data-driven approaches, those are two common themes that can help you align both PBIS and school counseling. So what does this look like in action? Let's break it down here by tiers. So you have tier one, your school-wide um, programming. What can that possibly include? Your SEL lessons, your behavioral expectations. Maybe this is your staff training on de-escalation and classroom management. Um, positive reinforcement systems. Think of what are you doing for all students, right? Then you have your tier 2, that targeted supports. These are your school counseling groups. Maybe you're supporting students who were flagged on your universal screener for internalizing. Maybe these are helping foster greater social skills, assisting your younger ones with self-regulation because their report card said that they don't always keep their hands to themselves, or some other type of feedback that on their report card that you use as data to say, you know what, I have to implement something here to help these students. This is check in, check out. This is consultation with teachers and families. And then, of course, as you're moving into that tier 3, that more intensive support, this could be crisis. This is a lot of ongoing collaboration, consultation, even advocacy. This is, connecting students with resources, referring them to appropriate supports. This is also being at the table and having your voice heard, not leading and doing everything by yourself, but being at the table, because we do have a lot to contribute, but we want to be contributors just like everyone else. So, of course, there's benefits to alignment, or I really probably wouldn't be doing this presentation, but it just makes sense too. Think about it. Why have a program that, say you have your PBIS program, but then you have, this teacher teaching these behavioral expectations in their class, and then you have um, this teacher teaching these expectations, and then you switch classes and kids don't know what is expected of them. Or better yet, you are teaching in the specials rotation and you are the gatekeeper of the SEL language, so no one else teaches SEL except for you in the specials rotation. Now, how does that language continue to be reinforced, which is a huge component of PBIS? It doesn't. It's basically dead on arrival. You teach it, and then by the time the kids leave your classroom, it's gone. That's why advocating for maybe teachers to take on that role and you be the supportive person, or ensuring that teachers are there for the instruction and not using it as an extra prep period. I know everybody's busy, right? We're all pulled in a million directions, but if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Ultimately, aligning these improves school climate. Isn't that what our administrators are always looking to do, especially in today's world where it's hard. It's hard to be in education right now. So let's make it easier on ourselves. Work smarter, not harder. Aligning them also supports student mental health and success. It connects. That is just, that you don't have to do everything in silo. There's overlap. So if you are teaching behavioral expectations, it makes sense to teach SEL, because that's how, if kids are regulated, they can meet those behavioral expectations. But how do they learn how to be regulated, right? We want to make sure that everyone, that it's a level playing field. Yes, some families can teach different coping skills. Yes, some homes, are reinforcing different things. But when we do it at tier 1, we make sure that everybody has that same access to information and that skill development. And it's better for everyone. It's better for the entire school. And it sets everyone up for success. But also, I think it's important to note that there's so many funding opportunities through PBIS and MTSS and things of that nature. So if we're advocating and we feel like we need funding for something within our programming, connecting those two can give you leverage, making PBIS a useful structure to integrate your school counseling initiatives. So think about how this can help you advocate for what you've been asking for, but now you're using maybe a program or language that makes more sense to your administration. So I do have another mic drop. So in the chat, what data do you use most to guide your interventions? Um, you could put in the chat all the letters that are applicable to you. Do you use discipline referrals, your ODRs? Do you look at attendance? Sometimes I think it's just so overwhelming with all the data points that we have. And it's like sometimes like where do we get started? Pick one. Pick one and pick one that is a priority for your administration so you can work together and have that conversation at the beginning of the year with your agreement with your administrator. This puts you on track to building that program. Your PBIS, there is evidence-based interventions for attendance, or those frequent flyers who are looking to always leave class and go to the nurse. You know them, your nurse knows them. What are you doing for them to get them back in the classroom so they could learn? That's data. How are you collecting it? And then what are you doing about it? Because if you're going to collect it, you have to plan and respond with something. But there's so many data sources, but you'll see here that most of that is stuff we're already looking at. So if you're looking at it, let's align it. So this is just a screenshot of some data examples, I guess you want to say, that my team and I used at my last school district. So if you attended our presentation at the annual conference this past December, you might have seen this before, but these are just screenshots. And no, those student names are not real; those are made up. But this is just an example of data and overlap of PBIS and school counseling. So in the top left-hand corner, you see a chart with different interventions. This is a screenshot of our comprehensive advanced tiers manual. It outlines every single intervention that is in our program. And my program was the PBIS program. So it was everything. We have check and check out, and at what tier are we using it? And what are the qualifiers? What kind of consent do we need from families? Who's the coordinator? What is the fidelity checklist to make sure we're continuously doing it accurately and effectively? So I'm sharing this just so you can see kind of the integration and what that looks like. And then on the right-hand side, that's just a sample of how we were monitoring the fidelity implementation of all of our different interventions. So those are ones that we've used. Check and check out is a pretty common one. Check and connect might be something you've also heard. That's more of mentoring. I think it does really well for like middle school to high school students, especially those with chronic absenteeism. Of course, our school counseling groups, short-term counseling, bus buddies, because I don't know about your school, but every school I've ever worked at, elementary kids really struggle with sitting on the bus. So we need an intervention for that, because if we're collecting the data, we're going to respond. Class Pass, that's the intervention to help support students who are looking to constantly get out. Let's teach them to stay in, to work through that angst. And that's what that does. But the intervention fits within that PBIS framework. So these are just examples, and honestly, these screenshots aren't the most current either. So this is just some little things to look at, and lastly is just on the bottom. So sometimes we have so much data, we have to think about who else can help us. And so we had an administrative assistant in the office who was assigned to help the school counseling K through 12 department. And we set up the spreadsheets and the reports, and she ran them, and we were flagging students that qualified with different data points. So every week when we saw students, when their box was clicked that they were at 3 or more majors and it turned red, that week we were putting them on our agenda to say, all right, what are we doing about this? Because if you don't have the structure and the process in place, kids will fall through the cracks, or you're not going to be monitoring those interventions effectively. So you want to be able to continuously monitor and see whether or not they're working. Sometimes they don't, so you have to make an adjustment and tweak it. But that's just what that's one spreadsheet looked like. So I think sometimes that's helpful to for a visual. And here I wanted to share something that I've shared in the past too, just different examples of putting your message out there with your data. So we collect it and collect it and collect it, but are you, um, using it to advocate? Are you using it to educate? So, we're always really focused on, and our administrators and our goals are always really outcome driven. But I think, there's a reason why there's different kinds of data. Sometimes our colleagues have no idea what we do. So even saying like, at this point, I did 82 classroom lessons and I spent 47 hours in classrooms. They might be like, wow, I had no idea Larissa was doing all of this, or that they've had 46 different group counseling sessions at this point in the school year, or made over 100 phone calls to parents. Wow, I didn't realize that they were reaching out to families so often. Control your narrative, use your data. You know, I've been lucky to have access and use Scuda, which makes that really, really helpful. Um, but you'll see here some other screenshots of presentations that we've done and data points we shared. We really focused, our administration really wanted to improve attendance. And that is where we really put a lot of emphasis on that particular year. And so we wanted to tell our community, because they were probably tired of hearing us constantly talk about attendance, that guess what? We had a 42% decrease in chronic absenteeism. Let's celebrate. That was a community effort. And one thing that I think is important, like with overlap and things like that, and working smarter, not harder, in the district I worked in, it was a small rural school. And so my advisory council served multi purposes, because we didn't have 1,000 parents and to kind of choose from. And a lot of times you had the same families committing to different kind of advisory councils, working with the principal, working with the superintendent for comp planning, working with the school counseling department. So we decided to just make one community collaboration committee. And we did it all. So we met more than twice a year because we had to get it all in, but it really aligned everything. This meant that our work was aligned with the administration's work, and we collaborated to put those presentations together, quarterly. It was a really nice way to streamline things, and it connected everything from our school counseling program to, the efforts that they're seeing through the principal. Like everything just aligned. And when we shared it with our committee, it just made sense for them too. And it started to click like, well, oh, this is why we're doing it. This makes sense. And it always looked like the right hand actually knew what the left hand was doing. And, sometimes it doesn't look like that. And then last but not least, two of the other screenshots there. One is that SAP referrals, and it has like a toilet, and you might be wondering, what in the world is that? Well, on the other side, on the bottom, we used to do presentations to our teachers every faculty meeting, like, hey, here's some updates on our student progress that are in some tier 2 interventions. They're graduating, they're doing this, they're exceeding their goals. Like, wow. Well, at the end of the year, I had a teacher in one of my feedback forms tell me, while they appreciate how much time and effort I put into everything and that our team works on, that they don't listen to it. So I was like, well, that's harsh but honest feedback, and I appreciate that. So I went back to my college days, and I used to do something on my dorm floor that was similar. It was called stall stories. And so I took that concept, and I know everyone pretty much uses the bathroom at some point. So we decided to start essentially condensing everything we wanted to share with faculty onto this When Nature Calls, Read the Walls. And we would tape it inside the bathroom, and embedded in there were little riddles. And if they caught the riddle, and they emailed, whatever the directions said in there, whether it was our principal or one of us, there was like incentives for teachers. So they were reading it because they wanted to win something, whether it was gift cards or, ice cream or an extra dress down day, all those things. But it was just to get them to really like look at the data rather than just um, have me look, they're looking at my face, but not really listening to anything that I'm saying. So having it be a little bit more meaningful, intentionally meaningful. So where do you start? Collaboration strategies. If you're not, if your school already has a PBIS team and you're not on it, why don't you join or at least start observing and going to their meetings? Some schools have to shift some things because sometimes it's the same group of people doing everything and they get tired and they get burnt out. And we know this. So you need, to help your administration think about how can we creatively do this that gets a full school buy-in. And you're never going to get 100% buy-in. That's why we have three tiers. It's that doesn't just apply for students. That's for the adults too. But seriously, um, join that, integrate that, work with your principal and your administration. If there isn't full school buy-in, an example would be um, this was a non-negotiable in our district. And so at one point it wasn't like that, but this wasn't going to get up and off the ground running to the extent that we really wanted it to work and we believed in it. So our required contractual faculty meetings always had PBIS time built in it. And so every single faculty member had to serve on a committee. And so it was everybody's hands were in, and there was, our administrator helped with the agenda creation, but there was always work to do and there was committee chairs. So it was there's some creative things. So if you're stuck in that situation right now, reach out to me and maybe I could help you just come up with some different ideas that have worked for us. Like I said, it's never 100%. There's always going to be a complainer, but that's not why you do it. You do it because it's going to help students that you work with and that are in your school and your community. Um, but what are some other collaborative strategies? You know, co-leading some staff training. Um, you know, if you don't yet have SEL at a tier one, talk about how it can align with your current your behavioral expectations. One thing that we did that we worked on was aligning and updating our PBIS matrices. So all those matrices that are in the hallways and say like ready, respectful, responsible, and it has like little bullet points underneath. Well, instead of it just talking about, you know, uh, just the behavior, we integrated the SEL language that we were teaching from second step. So how are you ready? Yes, it looks like this, but how do you get there? And so in the resources, I did provide an example of one of those matrices so you can see the language. We worked on that. We piloted it. We really tore apart the curriculum, finding common language and things that seemed like easy to roll off the tongue when we first implemented our SEL curriculum. So teachers provided feedback, and we had a couple teachers that really took lead, collected feedback to say, all right, these are the phrases that we're finding ourselves reinforcing the most. Well, if we're already finding ourselves reinforcing this the most, then those must be the things that are sticking with us and that we want to be stuck with the kids. So those are the things that are going to be integrated in those PBIS matrices. Obviously, the family and community engagement. That's a huge part of PBIS, because when you're creating all these, expectations at tier one, you're also thinking about the cultural norms of all the families in your district. So, getting and obtaining feedback from them, because you might be saying, "Oh, these are our expectations at tier one," and then that just doesn't fit. Um, for some families. And so, getting feedback, making adjustments, learning what you can do. To be respectful of everyone's cultures and to let people feel like they are a part of your community is so important. And that's what we do as school counselors. So it makes sense for us to jump in here. So of course, with any integration, there's going to be some challenges, but there's always, some solutions to start with, right? Time is always a huge one. Buy-in, like I said, is always a big one. Um, but we can always advocate. We can always use our data, building the partnerships. So the more that we do those three, those challenges start decreasing. and we start winning some. And you got to celebrate even the little wins. I know sometimes we're looking for the big win, that extra counselor to reduce our caseload. Yes, we've all been there. Some of us are still there. Probably the majority of us are still there. But celebrate those small wins too, because those add up and those are important. So don't give up. Reach out to colleagues in different districts, engage in different networking opportunities, because there are people that are doing this, and there is help. And sometimes just having another colleague to bounce things off of to troubleshoot is such a helpful thing to getting this implemented. So I pretty much just said this. Start small. Start like small as in just one thing. One thing after today that maybe you could start working towards aligning. Maybe you're just going back and telling your principal, listen, during my summer hours, I'd like to meet with you for a little bit to talk about how school counseling and PBS really should be working hand in hand. I'm not telling you to take on one more thing and manage it all, but you are such a critical voice, that should be at the table collaborating, right? We do this all the time anyways. So just collaborate with that PBIS team, or collaborate with teachers that you think, share similar um, views as you, as like, here's some things that we always talk about we want to do, but we don't know how to do it. Start collaborating with them to discuss how can we do this here? What can this look like here? And of course, going back to your data, not only are we going to use it to identify interventions, but also to track progress and adjust as needed. And then, of course, to celebrate. And it's okay. If sometimes it doesn't work, that's okay. We learn from it, right? Isn't that what we tell the kids? We learn and we adjust and we give ourselves grace. But these are just 3 action steps to really start working towards implementation right after today. So speaking of action steps, this is my last mic drop. What is one action step that you will take to better align PBIS and school counseling in your school? Or if you don't have either right now, what are you going to do to maybe start working in that direction? So drop that in the chat. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching and engaging in my presentation today. It's wonderful that you're here. I hope you've took something from this presentation, but like I said before, I love to share. So please email me if you have any questions, or if I mentioned any resource and you're like, tell me about this, or where can I find this? There is a QR code there where I did upload a few PDFs of some of the things that I thought would be of interest to you. Um, so take a look, reach out if you have questions, but best of luck. We're in it together. And I hope you enjoy some of the other, whatever other presentations you are watching. Have a great end of your school year.